Cologne, and I'm going to be having a conversation with Rosa Rivers for a People's History of Harlem, an oral history project at the New York Public Library. It is June 28th, and this is being recorded at the New Heritage Theater, and it is now 10:36 a.m. Thank you so much for interviewing with us. It's a pleasure to have you. So I'm going to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, you know, you just said something that really resonates on why this interview is important. When I was in high school, my first job was with the New York Public Library. And so how apropos that you guys would be here, or young ladies interviewing me around the project that will be a part of the New York Public Library's history. That's number one. Number two is that after being involved in the cultural community for the last 52 years, 2 years ago, the New York Public Library documented my history, and it's now in the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, available to millions of researchers all over the world. And now to be added and having this additional opportunity to talk about the connection between the library and the work that I do is just very, very important.
Great, it's awesome how it comes full circle.
So the question that you asked me, the first question is something in reference to what I do.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a theatrical and film producer. I started out a little over 50 years ago as a gopher. A gopher is a person who will do anything that is asked of him with no hesitation. I was introduced to a person by the name of Roger Furman, who was a member of the American Negro Theater. I can't begin to this whole interview with me revolves around the library, because Roger Furman and the American Negro Theater, along with Ossie Davis, Ruby Dee, Harry Belafonte, and Sidney Poitier, was housed in the basement of the 135th Street New York Public Library. And I met Roger in 1964 when he was a public speaker at that time, a local branch of the YWCA. And he was a guest speaker talking about his experience as a young man in his 20s, going to the basement of a library and becoming a part of the American Negro Theater. I was fascinated by his story, and he also mentioned at the end of the sessions as a guest speaker that he was starting his own theater company in Harlem. And I joined the theater company. I was not interested in the theater at that time. I was interested more in being articulate when I had opportunities to speak to people as opposed to being on stage. It was a life changer for me because I was introduced to theater through Roger and the history of the American Negro Theater. And I did everything. I was a chauffeur. I was a ticket taker. I was the provider of a hands-on handyman, taking Roger to get props and costumes and all of those things that are important if you're running a theater or running a business, but never thinking that eventually one day I would be running that business or running that theater.
Can you describe your business a little bit, how it started?
So I started out with Roger Furman, like I mentioned earlier, as a gopher. I did a lot of different things. Roger Furman saw something in me where he actually said that because I was going to school at the time, in the evening, that, and I was taking business courses, that he thought it would make a good fit, that I could help do some of the administrative work, and he would concentrate on the creative. 6 years later of being and working with him, he said, "Why don't we why don't you have an official position in the theater and become our business manager? And then he would continue to concentrate on the creative. And being business manager meant that I had an opportunity to review contracts for the actors, to secure venues, to help with marketing and promotion, and all those other elements that go into marketing and promoting your product, which is theater at that time. And Roger died in 1983. I said I met Roger in 1964. He died in 1983. And at that point, the board of directors of the theater company asked if I would take over the theater, which I reluctantly did, but I did it. And so the theater structure it was a not-for-profit theater, that it existed off of grants that they had received from the federal government, the city government, and the state government, and that the additional income came from box office and donations from individuals who wanted to help. It was not a business where you could see a lot of financial rewards. It was a business that had to have the support of these institutions in order to survive. The art form of culture, in many instances, is a subsidized art form, meaning that through patrons and supporters, they exist. It's not the same as a commercial business, and that's the business of culture. It's a subsidized art form.
So going back to marketing and promoting, you did that a little bit. Can you describe exactly how you marketed and how you promoted the business?
During the marketing and promotion of the activities that we created, there were what we call collateral materials. There were flyers and posters. We created mailing lists back then. This is pre-emails, so a lot of it was hand done. We did a lot of mailing to our audiences. We asked that our actors, directors, and choreographers, that they also play a role in helping to market and promote by telling all their friends and family members that they were in plays at our theater. And we were fortunate that there were a number of local newspapers that also were interested in the work that we were doing. When Roger died in '83 and I took over the theater, I met a young man named Duma Ngruvu from South Africa, who had left South Africa because of the racist regime in South Africa and decided to leave South Africa after working with a publisher, a brilliant activist in South Africa named Stephen Biko. And Duma came to Harlem, and a woman by the name of Phyllis Stickney, who was one of our actresses, introduced me to Duma. And with Duma, he enlightened me about theater in another country that was in turmoil because of apartheid. And we decided, through Duma's insistence, that we do South African plays. Well, this was new for a Harlem-based theater company, that we would be looking at a country 10,000 miles away to do that work in the community, and that became newsworthy. We did our first play called Woza Albert, Zulu word for rise up, Woza Albert. And the New York Times came to see that work, and they put us on the front page of the weekend section of the New York Times, saying that these artists came from South Africa, they performed in the Village, and then they came to Harlem. It was a news item. In addition to that, downtown producers of the major theaters. Joe Pappas had the Public Theater, the Lincoln Center Theater. Came those producers and artistic directors came up to Harlem to see the work, and again that was new and it was newsworthy, and they were excited and they decided to put their arms around what we were doing, and I found myself in new relationships with downtown people coming uptown to do the work that I was interested in doing, and through that we became a lot different than the other theater companies. So when you talk about your brand, your signature, we then became a unique signature theater in terms of what other theaters of color were doing at that time, and it was newsworthy.
Let me ask you this, Rosa, if I may interrupt. Where were you performing these international?
Our theater during the 60s was at 290 Lenox Avenue, which is at 125th Street, between 125th and 124th Street, and Lenox Avenue, now called Malcolm X Boulevard. We occupied the entire top floor, and in that building was a dance company, Diane McIntyre, Sounds in Motion. We also had the Adelco Committee, which was a group of ladies who helped market and promote a lot of the cultural activities, specifically around theater that was also in Harlem. So all of those artists that I'm talking about came to that location to see their work done in Harlem. And the people from downtown came uptown. And it was a very small 99-seat theater, but we packed them in. Sometimes you were, I know we violated a lot of fire laws, and we had seats on the stage where the artists were performing because people really wanted to see this work from South Africa.
Okay, and in the theater business, how do you identify your audience needs or speak to them?
Our audiences is very interesting and very diverse. I can say that I'm in a business that I've been in now for 50 plus years. And a lot of the people took that journey with me. So that meant that we had a core audience that started out in their 30s and 40s, average age. And then now they're in their 60s and 70s because they took that trip. We have done work with an outreach to what I call millennials to try and get them involved and coming to the theater. And it's been very difficult. The way people look at theater and the technology for younger people is so different than when we started years ago. We've been able to capture a number of our activities and videotaped it and put it on YouTube. So there's another audience that have seen the work that I don't personally interact with, but they know of the work because they watch it. I and my partner Jamal Joseph, who is the executive artistic director of the theater, I have made a mission over the last 20 years to get young people involved in what we do. So the theater created another division in 1987 called Impact. Impact is the youth division and the signature program now of New Heritage. Impact is an acronym that stands for Inspiration, Motivation, Preparation, Activism, Commitment, and Teamwork. Our young people have excelled in becoming cultural ambassadors. We use the arts to make them better citizens of the community. They're very creative. We've been very fortunate that the activities that my young people have been involved in represents Harlem in another kind of way. So although perhaps we have not connected with the younger audiences that come see our productions as much as I would like to see, we have created another vehicle for going to those audiences. Impact Repertory Theater performs in excess of 70 shows a year. They're in public schools, colleges, universities, museums, and libraries. They write their own material, they choreograph it. We're proud that our young people wrote a song that was accepted in a film called August Rush with Robin Williams. That film and the music, especially the music that the kids wrote, was selected and nominated for an Oscar for Best Song in a Film. And my kids further were invited to perform at the Oscars before millions of people. And then the following year, with John Legend and a few other celebrity artists, that whole soundtrack was nominated for a Grammy. So to have young people from our community be that creative and to evolve into being accepted worldwide like that is just wonderful. This morning I just got off the phone with South Africa talking about what happened 30 years ago when we brought the work from South Africa to Harlem, telling me that they would like to be able to do a reunion because a few months ago the writer-director came to see my young kids, and he was so impressed with the young kids to see how they've developed over the last 20 years. A lot of them, when they started, were 14 and 15 years old. So 20 years later, they're actually running the program, and it's beautiful to see. So although young people may not be a part of our extended audiences, we are reaching them doing other methods, and our young people use all sorts of social media to get the word out on the things that we do.
Great. So what challenges did you face in the beginning of your business, and what challenges do you face now?
The challenges, excuse me, that we faced in the early stages of the theater was around sustainability. We decided that we wanted to remain in Harlem. The funders, certain funders, there are two things that happened. When Roger died, and I mentioned earlier that we were receiving funding from the city and state agencies, they supported the theater around the founder of the theater, Roger. So when Roger died and a new person stepped in, that support was cut in half because they weren't sure of the direction, and clearly they didn't know who I was. So they wanted to be supportive, but not at the same level. So that meant that we were handicapped now, starting a new decade of leadership. I then saw that this was going to be a challenge, and I tried to strategize on how best to continue the work that I inherited. And the first thing that I did is I called up another producer by the name of Woody King, and he has a theater called the New Federal Theater, and he's considered the dean of black theater. But as I was working over the previous 20 years with Roger, I watched and went to a number of his productions. And I said, you know, I should reach out to Woody and see if there are things that we could do together. And Woody welcomed the outreach, and we worked together on a few plays. That meant now that there were two companies working together, we could split the cost. I then reached out to another producer by the name of Carl Clay, and he's in Queens, and he has the Black Spectrum Theater, and we did the same thing. We started working together, reached across the river to New Brunswick, New Jersey, and started working with Rick Kahn, another theater producer, people that I got a chance to know, and we started doing things together. So That kind of made up for the cut in support that we received from the city and state and federal agencies. And then through that relationship, others came to me. Lincoln Center and Joe Papp both came to work with our theater, and that gave us another level of support. So the challenges that existed initially through my strategy and the collaborations put me on a level playing field that I knew that I could continue to do the work. The achievements for the theater and also for my team and myself was that we did not realize that we were making history when we were doing that work. The issues in South Africa was very akin to what happened in America during the Civil Rights Movement. And we know that people like Harry Belafonte, Ossie Davis, and Ruby Dee, and others joined the Civil Rights Movement to help Dr. Martin Luther King and use their celebrity status to help put another spotlight on the need to rectify what was happening in this country to people of color. Similarly, when we started bringing in work from South Africa, it was during the height of apartheid when there was a media blackout of information coming directly from South Africa. Artists were prohibited from America to going to South Africa. And in fact, during one of my opportunities to visit South Africa, I went to get a visa to go to South Africa, and I was denied a visa. I was on a list. I was blacklisted. That's what they used to call it. Being on the blacklist means that you are undesirable. And I was considered an undesirable person to visit South Africa by the government because of the work that I was doing, bringing in the artists from South Africa to tell their stories. So that kind of history was happening, and our role was to tell the story and to use culture and to break down barriers of misunderstanding. Fast forward, the work that we were doing started traveling from uptown, downtown, nationally and internationally, all around the world. The young people, the 35 young people that we brought over from South Africa on our third play, a musical called Sarafina, dealt with a massacre of school children that happened in South Africa called the Soweto riots. These children in South Africa were told that their curriculum that was being taught could only be taught in 2 languages, their native language and in Afrikaans. Afrikaans is a hybrid language of the oppressors in South Africa during that time. They wanted to learn English so that they could communicate with the rest of the world. And as a result, they boycotted the administration. The government decided that they would force these kids to go to school and to accept the curriculum. And when the kids protested, the army shot them down and killed them. And that was considered in 1977 the Soweto massacre. And so that story, when I heard it and understood that there were these young people who were taking that material and making it a musical, and to be able to bring that into the United States and tell that story We were very fortunate, like I said early on, not knowing what we were doing with the first few plays from South Africa and Lincoln Center coming. Lincoln Center put their arms around this particular production, and it had its run downtown. We brought it uptown. There's a poster in Harlem at City College. We brought it to City College. And then the show went to Broadway. And it lasted on Broadway for 2 years, and then there was a national company. The South Africans had their own company where they trained their actors, and it was called Committed Artists. And the philosophy with Committed Artists was that the actors accepted into Committed Artists would do materials that dealt with their culture, and that any opportunity that they got to leave the country and to perform elsewhere, that whatever they made, those funds would go back into their country, into their organization, and they would train the next group of actors to, so that they could then go. So there was a continuum. With Sarafina being the most successful and being on Broadway, these actors made more money in 1 week than their families made all year. Okay? The actors back then were paid $500 a week. The gross national, their parents were making, if they were lucky, $500 a year. And like I said, these actors, these young kids lasted, not lasted, but performed in South Africa, all over the world. I was given the extra charge of being the titular head of Committed Artists US, meaning the United States, and then the rest of the world, and then they had Committed Artists South Africa. And my responsibility was to keep the Sarafina story going. As a result of that, our team we were awarded at the United Nations the Medal of Peace, because what we were able to do with thousands of people coming to see us on Broadway and hearing the kids perform, we could tell the story that the African National Congress and politicians and leaders couldn't tell, because when people saw those kids perform, their heart beat. They connected with what was happening. Those young people are still working today. They are in The Lion King all over the world. And the people that started with me, Duma, who introduced me to South Africa Theater, is a consultant to Disney Company, and he's responsible for auditioning actors of color and African actors for the roles in The Lion King. And The Lion King is still considered one of the best musicals on Broadway. And after, I think now, they may be in their 15th year, it's a phenomenon, but it started with a lot of our young people morphing into becoming professional actors in the production all over the world.
Awesome, that's a great story. What would you say are the keys to success in your business or in business in general?
Key to my success is being consistent. I don't think that that I've done anything other than be who I am. It's in my personality. I'm a collaborator. The people find it easy to approach me. I can communicate well with people, and I've surrounded myself with really good and dedicated people who, like myself, when I joined the theater, I never looked at theater in the 60s as something that I would be doing for the rest of my life. I was just assisting someone who I admired. But that person really mentored me through the process, and other people were attracted to me because of that. I was always walking in someone else's shadow, helping them. not to walk in front of them, but to walk behind them and beside them. And as a result of that, it boded well for me.
Awesome. And what motivated you to keep going into?
Enjoying what I was doing and understanding the enormous commitment that was being made. I lived the pain of those children. I lived the pain of apartheid because now I was accepted into their families and they would tell me the stories. When we went to South Africa to bring these 35 kids as young as 13 and 14 years old to another country, we had to get permission from their families to come to the United States. They didn't know me. I then had to assume the role of being a surrogate father for all of these young people, young ladies and boys living together, coming into a country that was an enormous responsibility. But they allowed it to happen. And fortunately for us, we did all the right things. And Lincoln Center was a big, big supporter because they also understood the responsibility. We had to educate the students in this country to make sure that they were being educated. We had to make sure that the funds that they received weren't spent foolishly and that money was going back to their families, and we took control over making sure that that would happen. The theater unions here did not look kindly on that kind of oversight because they felt that, well, if people are able to earn money, that they should be able to do whatever they want. But we said, no, we want to make sure that we establish bank accounts, we establish a way of allocating a portion of their dollars to go back to, because at the end of the day, we didn't know how long we would be here, but we wanted to make sure that they had something going back to South Africa for their families.
Sounds great. So what advice would you give to young people starting their own business or starting out in theater?
When I started in theater, it was different. It was different because I made a commitment. I wasn't a pedestrian walking through the door going to the next location. I made a commitment to stay and help. Young people today, let's say you graduate from college, you're strapped with an enormous debt, or your family is strapped with an enormous debt. And so you're looking for opportunities